Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you are just absolutely exhausting yourself? Like pushing with every ounce of your being in your career or maybe your relationships or just, your daily life.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone hits that point.
Right. And you find that the harder you push, the more the system just pushes right back at you. You put in the overtime, you obsess over all the little details.
Yeah, you're trying to just force things to happen through sheer willpower.
Exactly. And yet the wheels just spin in the mud. I mean, I think anyone who has ever tried to achieve anything ambitious knows that exact feeling of just grinding against reality.
It's universally exhausting.
It really is. But there's a very unsettling question that comes up when you finally hit that wall. What if your relentless effort, like that very hard work that every self-help guru and business mentor taught you to revere, what if that is actually the exact thing that's breaking the machine?
That completely inverts everything we are taught about success, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
we are deeply conditioned, arguably from childhood, to believe that friction equals progress.
Right.
No pain, no gain.
Exactly. The underlying assumption is that if you aren't sweating or if you aren't constantly stressed and monitoring every single variable, you simply aren't moving forward. You're failing.
Yeah, you're just being lazy.
Right. But when we look really closely at the mechanics of highly advanced systems, and I mean whether we are talking about artificial intelligence, complex networks, or even quantum physics, that kind of forced, panicked effort is almost universally registered as a critical error.
Like it's a bug in the code.
Yes, it is literally just noise in the signal.
And that tension, that friction between human effort and systemic flow, well, that is the core of our deep dive today. We are looking at a highly unusual, incredibly dense set of notes and briefing documents.
They're fascinating documents, really.
They really are. They manage to blur the lines between mundane digital marketing problems, business management, quantum mechanics, and some truly profound metaphysics.
It's quite the mix. It is. So the notes belong to a man named ShunpeterZ. Sometimes he goes by Shomisuke or Shunsuke. And his background is super interesting because it is so rooted in that traditional high-friction world we were just talking about.
Right, he's a former investment banker, isn't he?
Yeah, former investment banker, a venture capitalist, and an SME manager who now runs an English conversation school over in Tokyo.
Which means he comes from an environment where what they call proof of work, like burning the midnight oil, grinding out results, leveraging sheer financial and intellectual force. That is basically the ultimate religion.
Absolutely. That was his whole reality.
Yeah.
But these documents chronicle a major shift away from that. They're actually presented as a dialogue. But he isn't talking to a mentor or, an AI chatbot like ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that.
No, the notes document an exchange with a higher sort of observational layer of his own consciousness.
Yeah, which he just refers to as Z. And the language Z uses is so unique. It's often poetic, kind of paradoxical, and highly analytical. It treats human emotional struggles as if they were literally just simple software glitches.
It's a very detached but precise perspective. And the mission of this deep dive is to synthesize ShunpeterZ's exchange with Z to help you, the listener, understand how the mechanics of modern technology might actually be a perfect mirror for the operating system of the universe itself.
That's a huge claim.
It is. We are looking at a fundamental transition from an ego-driven me operating system, which relies on all that relentless effort and friction you mentioned earlier, to what the notes call a zero-point field, or ZPF operating system.
The ZPF operating system.
Right. And that newer OS is based entirely on surrender, patience, and just allowing reality to auto-render.
So the ultimate goal here is to explore how to stop frantically mashing the control buttons of your life, right? And learn to let the system optimize itself for you. But to ground this, because honestly, zero-point field operating system sounds incredibly abstract, the source text actually starts with a very mundane, very frustrating business problem.
A very relatable one, too.
Oh, totally. So ShunpeterZ is trying to run digital ads for his English school in Tokyo. He's using modern ad platforms, setting up campaigns on Google and Meta. And he gives the AI algorithms a massive daily budget and basically says, go, spend the money, bring me students.
Just turn on the tap.
Right. But the AI refuses. It barely spends a dime, and the ad impressions just slow to an absolute crawl.
And anyone who has run a business recently knows this exact frustration. The natural human reaction is to assume the tool is broken.
Oh, yeah. You think, I must have messed up the settings.
Right, or you start looking for some hidden button to push to just force the spend. But the document explains something crucial about modern machine learning and advertising. These algorithms, specifically things like smart bidding or performance max, they are not just dumb hoses that you can blindly pump money through.
They're much more complex than that.
They are. They have developed what the text actually calls a defense instinct.
A defense instinct against the person paying the bill. That sounds kind of crazy.
In a way, yes, it does. The algorithm's primary directive is to seek out the golden wavelength. That is the document's term for a highly specific frequency of high-quality, high-converting traffic that actually protects your return on investment.
Okay, the golden wavelength. I like that.
Yeah, and to find that golden wavelength, the AI has to explore a multidimensional space of data. It tests a few impressions here, it measures the behavior, it tests a few over there, and if it doesn't find the exact right user who is actually likely to convert, it holds back the budget. It outright refuses to waste the money.
So the AI is essentially saying, look, I know you gave me $10,000 to spend today, but there aren't $10,000 worth of good customers out there right now, so I'm just gonna wait.
Exactly. It's playing the long game.
But as a business owner with overhead and rent, waiting literally feels like dying. I can imagine the sheer panic of looking at a dashboard, seeing $0 spent, and thinking, I have to fix this right now.
And that panic is exactly what the notes refer to as the state of doing. With a capital D, it is the human ego, the me, intervening because it just cannot tolerate the lack of visible movement.
It needs to feel like it's in control.
Right. So what does the business owner do? They go in and change the bidding strategy. They remove the target cost per acquisition limits. They tell the system to just maximize clicks at any cost, basically trying to force the system's hand to spend the budget.
Which, I mean, I've actually done that in the past. You just want to see the numbers move so you feel like you're at least doing something.
Yeah.
But the documents argue that this forced intervention creates a massive disaster.
It completely ruins the entire architecture. When you force the system like that, the AI gets confused. It interprets this panicked intervention as a brand new directive.
I see.
It assumes the human no longer cares about quality, profitability, or that golden wavelength, and just wants raw volume. So the AI opens the floodgates and starts sucking up what the text calls muddy water.
Muddy water, meaning low-quality traffic, like bots, accidental clicks, people who will never actually sign up for an English school in Tokyo.
Exactly. It just delivers garbage traffic. And this absolutely destroys the algorithm's learning model. The cost per acquisition skyrockets, and the entire digital plumbing system that the entrepreneur spent months building is suddenly contaminated with bad data.
Wow.
The irony here is so profound. The AI was actually protecting the user's business better than the user was protecting it themselves.
That is wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
The algorithm was demanding a state of being of patience, observation, and surrender to the process, while the human was trapped in a frantic state of doing.
The source material uses a really brilliant metaphor regarding water pressure to illustrate this. Imagine you are building this delicate underground plumbing system to tap into a very specific pure underground spring.
Right, the golden wavelength.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the system is probing, seeking the right pressure and the right path. If you get impatient and you hook up a massive industrial pump to the surface and just blast water through the pipes with maximum force to try and speed things up, well, you don't get more pure water. You literally burst the pipes.
You destroy the very thing you built.
Yeah, you flood the basement with mud and destroy the entire infrastructure.
That is the perfect visualization of what happens when we try to force complex systems. The system is always trying to optimize globally. It is looking for the true, sustainable, long-term answer.
But the ego doesn't care about long-term.
No, it doesn't. When you force it through panic, you drag it back to a local optimization, a short-term, messy, brute force fix that compromises everything. The AI's refusal to act isn't a bug in the software. It is a highly evolved feature designed to defend against the human's own impatience.
Okay, I understand the logic of that on a technical level, but let's be real for a second. Sitting there at your desk, watching the dashboard, seeing $0 spent and 0 new customers coming in when you know rent is due. That waiting period is physically agonizing.
It really is.
It feels like an actual threat to your actual survival.
It does. And that brings us to the psychological framework that makes that waiting period so painful in the first place. The notes call this the transition through the void. And it requires us to examine the old operating system we are all currently running on. The text refers to it as the Hero OS.
The Hero OS. It sounds noble, like you're the main character saving the day. But the documents frame it as a kind of malware, don't they?
They definitely reframe it as a highly inefficient legacy system. The Hero OS is the psychological framework built on the absolute conviction that success requires suffering, massive effort, and sacrifice.
If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count.
Exactly. It is the deep-seated belief that if a process wasn't painful and exhausting, the result just isn't valuable. And the notes really dig into where this comes from. It usually stems from a place of lacking or early childhood conditioning.
The documents actually get quite personal here. ShunpeterZ notes his own background with this operating system. He talks about overcompensating for childhood physical limitations.
Right, I remember that part.
Yeah, and he mentions a specific memory where his mother heavily criticized a sports victory, and another where he faced a childhood cheating accusation. These events build this intense subconscious need for control and validation.
They wire the brain for it.
Exactly. The Hero OS essentially whispers in your ear, if you aren't suffering, you aren't safe. If you don't micromanage every single variable, it'll all just fall apart.
Because the ego uses that suffering as proof of its own existence and worth. But the dialogue with Z outlines a necessary, inevitable transition away from that exhausting legacy system toward a new surrender OS.
But getting there is the hard part.
It is. The challenge is the bridge between those two states. It is a period of latency, a physical time lag where the old rules no longer work, but the new results haven't materialized yet.
The void?
Yes, the void. Z compares it to building a massive national dam. ShunpeterZ had just spent months building an incredible amount of intellectual and physical infrastructure for his business. He wrote 9 books, he launched a new website, and he created entirely new educational programs in a very short span of time.
Which is an unbelievable amount of output. I mean, that is the definition of putting in the work.
It really is. But here is the physical reality Z points out. When you finally finish constructing that massive dam and you open the gates, the water doesn't instantly appear at the faucet in your kitchen miles away.
Right, there's travel time.
It takes physical time for the immense volume of water to travel through those massive new pipes. During this blank period, this void, nothing appears to be happening at all.
Nothing is coming out of the faucet.
Exactly. And the ego, still running the Hero OS, which expects sweat to instantly equal reward, completely freaks out. It interprets the lack of immediate results not as a latency period, but as a catastrophic failure.
It's that moment where you think, I did all this work, I built the dam, and I'm still thirsty. I must have built it wrong. I'm a failure.
Yes. But Z explains this using physics, specifically thermodynamics, which I just found fascinating.
Oh, the latent heat concept. I loved this.
Right. Z uses the concept of latent heat. Think about boiling a pot of water on the stove. There is a period where you are pumping maximum thermal energy into that pot. The fire is roaring.
Eyeballs everywhere.
But if you put a thermometer in the water, once it hits 100 degrees Celsius, the temperature actually stops rising. It doesn't go to 101 or 102 degrees.
Right, it just caps out.
The energy is still pouring in from the stove, but structurally the energy is being absorbed to facilitate a phase change from liquid to gas.
So to the naked eye, it looks like the progress has completely stalled.
Completely stalled. If you don't understand physics, you might think the stove is broken and just turn it off in frustration. But internally, the molecular bonds are breaking down. Everything is changing.
Wow.
The boiling, chaotic, violently bubbling water right before it turns to steam is the moment of maximum physical stress. Z points out that the anxiety you feel in the void when things aren't moving isn't a sign of failure. It is the system absorbing massive amounts of energy right before a dimensional shift.
The notes use an analogy here that I absolutely loved, and it comes from the classic video game Final Fantasy IV.
Such a great comparison.
Right. So the main character, Cecil, starts the game as a Dark Knight. His most powerful attack literally requires him to sacrifice his own health points, his own life force, to deal damage to the enemy. It is the ultimate embodiment of the Hero OS. Friction, sacrifice, hurting yourself to win.
A very apt metaphor for modern burnout culture. We literally sacrifice our health for quarterly earnings.
We really do. But halfway through the game's storyline, Cecil realizes the darkness is destroying him. He has to change classes. He undergoes this trial on a mountain and becomes a paladin, a warrior of light, defense, and harmony. But here's a brilliant mechanical twist the game developers threw in. The exact moment he becomes a paladin, his level drops all the way back to level 1.
He loses all his perceived power, all his stats, all his abilities.
Yes. He feels incredibly weak. All his old, terrifying armor is gone. His old attacks don't work. For the player holding the controller, it induces sheer panic. You suddenly feel totally defenseless.
You're vulnerable.
Very. But the notes argue that this is exactly what letting go of the hero OS feels like in real life. You feel powerless because your old, reliable weapon suffering and forcing things is gone. But you aren't actually failing. You are just in a temporary adaptation period, a level 1 latency, preparing to equip the ultimate holy armor of the new infrastructure you've built.
And Z gives ShunpeterZ a very strict warning during this level 1 period. The most important rule is that you cannot pick up the dark sword again.
No matter how tempting it is.
Exactly. You cannot revert to the old OS of panic and doing just because the new Surrender OS feels unfamiliar and vulnerable.
Which sounds beautiful in theory. I mean, truly. But when the rubber meets the road, staying in that surrender state is incredibly difficult. There is a highly specific, very stressful, real-world example in the notes that tests this exact concept.
The Jiugaoka situation.
Yes. So ShunpeterZ was in the middle of closing down a small school location in a place called Jiugaoka. To give some context, the space was 15 tsubo. A tsubo is a Japanese measurement roughly equal to 3.3 square meters, so we're talking about a very small room.
Tiny.
Right. He expected the restoration fee, the cost to return the room to its original state, to be minimal, maybe entirely covered by the security deposit. Instead, he gets hit with a completely absurd bill from a major construction company for 5.3 million yen.
That is roughly 53,000 US dollars just to patch up a tiny room.
It's insane.
It's the ultimate test of the operating system, because under the old Hero OS, the ego would instantly go to war.
Oh, absolutely.
It would perceive this invoice not just as an error, but as a direct threat to survival. The immediate reaction would be righteous anger, panic, aggressive negotiations, and sleepless nights trying to figure out how to fight this injustice and control the outcome. It would be a massive expenditure of emotional and physical energy.
I know I would be losing sleep over a sudden $53,000 bill. I'd be furious. But Z introduces a totally different approach, a specific phrase that becomes a mantra in the notes. Just marvel.
Just marvel. Now, it is crucial to understand the nuance here, because it does not mean rolling over, giving up, and just being a victim. It doesn't mean blindly paying the 5.3 million yen and bankrupting yourself.
Right. You're not just surrendering your bank account.
Exactly. The notes specify that ShunpeterZ actually had a counter estimate from another independent company for 3.5 million yen. Just marvel means taking that 3.5 million yen counter estimate and tossing it back to the landlord, but doing it without a single ounce of emotional weight, fear, or anger.
But wait, how do you separate the action from the emotion when the stakes are that high? I mean, if a $53,000 bill hits my desk, the biological fear is very real. I have payroll to meet. How do you actually turn off that fear and just marvel?
By recognizing that the emotion is a biological artifact of the old OS. It's not a requirement for solving the problem. You treat the interaction like you are simply clicking a button on a user interface.
Like submitting a form online.
Right. You don't attach a sprawling narrative of victimhood to it.
Yep.
You don't tell yourself a story about how greedy the landlord is or how unfair the world is. You don't try to energetically force the landlord to yield. You just play the card you have, the 3.5 million yen estimate. And then you sit back, maybe eat some popcorn, and literally marvel at how the universe responds to that input.
You just watch it play out.
Yes. You treat the exorbitant bill not as a crisis that defines your worth or safety, but as a fascinating error code popping up on your screen. You process it administratively, not emotionally.
So you completely decouple your internal state from the external event.
Precisely. Because if you engage with anger, you are generating friction. You are sending out a frequency of conflict, which, as Z explains, the system will simply mirror back to you as a protracted, painful legal battle. By remaining neutral and marveling, you offer no resistance for the conflict to attach to.
I love the elegance of that. It takes all the venom out of daily stressors. But this raises a massive philosophical question. If we're supposed to treat reality like we are just clicking buttons on a user interface and waiting for the system to process the inputs, who or what is actually running the machine?
That is the big question.
Who built the UI? And that pivot takes the notes from a discussion about business mindset straight into a radical redefinition of the universe itself.
This is where the dialogue with Z shifts heavily into metaphysics. Z plays with the word universe itself, completely redefining it as U-inverse.
U-inverse. U-inverted. That's a mind-bending concept. Break that down for me.
The core premise of U-inverse is that the outer world you experience every day is not a separate, objective reality that is happening to you. It is a direct, inverted projection of your internal frequencies and beliefs. It's a localized auto-rendering system.
So it's basically a mirror.
Exactly. And as long as you hold on to the you, meaning the ego, the obsession with I must do this, I must control this, I must fight this bill, the universe reflects that exact state of resistance back at you. When you push, it is programmed to push back.
But when you stop pushing,
When you invalidate that desperate me subject and synchronize with the flow of the whole system, reality begins to auto-render results that far exceed your personal capabilities with zero friction.
the notes synthesize this into a concept they call the light code economy, and they actually use the mechanics of cryptocurrency to explain the difference between the two operating systems. They compare the old world, the Hero OS, to proof of work.
It is a really brilliant analogy. In early blockchain models like Bitcoin, proof of work is the consensus mechanism used to validate transactions and create new blocks. But how does it actually work?
It takes a lot of computing power.
A massive amount. It requires specialized computer rigs burning immense amounts of electricity to solve complex, arbitrary mathematical puzzles. It requires extreme computational energy, high friction, and exhausting effort just to generate a single block of reality.
And in our daily lives, that translates to burning the midnight oil, grinding out hours, stressing over every detail just to prove our worth and generate a single result.
Exactly. You are constantly paying high gas fees, which in human terms means friction, stress, cortisol, and burnout. It is a highly inefficient, exhausting, and ultimately unsustainable way to live and create.
So proof of work is like, manually mining coal in the dark just to keep a single light bulb on. The new OS, the U-inverse model, runs on proof of stake. And in the crypto world, proof of stake doesn't require mining rigs or massive energy consumption. You don't solve arbitrary puzzles.
No, you just hold the asset.
Right. You stake your coins on the network, and the network validates the reality based on your stake.
For human beings, Z suggests this is like being a solar panel. You don't do anything to the sun. You don't fight it. You don't negotiate with it. You don't try to force it to shine harder.
You just sit there.
You simply exist in the right frequency. You ensure your panels are facing the right direction, and the power flows through you with zero friction. Reality auto-renders the results based purely on the purity and alignment of your being, or what the notes translate as your deeply held beliefs, or canon in Japanese.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, like the practical reality of living in modern society, it forces a complete reevaluation of how we view business and money. I mean, under this U-inverse proof of stake model, what happens to ambition? What happens to revenue?
Z explains that money is no longer the goal. It cannot be something you chase or attempt to make through force. It becomes an automatic byproduct of your frequency.
The text actually refers to the business itself as a physical port.
Yes, a physical port for the zero-point field.
Let's define the ZPF, because it isn't just some mystical term. It has actual roots in quantum mechanics. In physics, the zero-point field refers to the lowest possible energy state of a quantum mechanical physical system. Even in a perfect vacuum, cooled to absolute zero where all classical thermal energy is completely removed, there is still a massive amount of fluctuating electromagnetic energy.
Right, it's not actually empty.
No, it's an underlying field of infinite potential that exists everywhere. And Z uses the ZPF metaphorically as the infinite, unmanifested background of reality.
So how does a business become a port for that field? The infrastructure ShunpeterZ built, the 9 books, the websites, the school programs, Z tells him they aren't traps designed to catch money. They are physical wiring.
They're conduits.
Yes, they are physical ports designed to allow the zero-point field to flow from infinite potential into the 3D manifested world. If the intention, the being, is pure and unresisting, the system will naturally route the necessary energy through those ports to sustain the creation.
And that energy could be anything.
Exactly. That energy might take the form of money, the right people, or sudden opportunities. The money is just the UI representation, the digital readout on your screen of that energy flowing.
So to you listening right now, the challenge posed by these notes is profound. Are you currently exhausting yourself, paying high gas fees in your life? Are you burning yourself out through proof of work just to prove you deserve to exist, to prove you deserve your salary or your title?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. What would actually happen if you just staked your claim on your own being, aligned your frequency, and let the system render the result?
It is a terrifying leap for the ego to make, though, because it requires giving up the illusion of control And that illusion is never stronger than when we deal with other human beings.
Definitely.
Because if the universe is just my inverted projection, if it is my own personal auto-rendering system, what does that make you? What does that make my family, my friends, my coworkers?
Right, because this is where the philosophy usually hits a brick wall. If everything is just a projection of my mind, doesn't that lead to a very lonely, arrogant sort of solipsism, where I am the only real person and everyone else is just a robot existing for my amusement?
That is the exact trap Z warns against. And to solve this, the notes pull from a 17th century German philosopher and mathematician, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, and his concept of the monadology.
Leibniz is fascinating. He co-invented calculus alongside Newton, but his metaphysics were entirely different.
Completely different. Leibniz proposed that the universe is not made of tiny physical particles of matter, but of fundamental, indivisible, non-physical units of perception called monads. He famously said that monads are windowless.
Meaning nothing can go in or out of them.
Right. They contain their entire universe within themselves, programmed by a pre-established harmony. Z modernizes this 17th century philosophy brilliantly using IT terminology. Z argues that we do not all live in one giant shared objective box called the universe.
So we aren't sharing a world.
Not exactly. Instead, every single person has their own entirely self-contained virtual perception server, or VPS, your own private monad.
So it's like every human being is running their own private instance of a video game server.
Exactly. And in your server, your monad, the other people in your life appear as NPCs, non-player characters. But they're not objectively them. They are rendered through your specific beliefs, your past traumas, your current frequency.
Okay, I think I follow.
The version of your spouse or your boss or your mother that you interact with is actually just your monad's custom rendering of them.
But wait, if they are just NPCs rendered by my server, how does that avoid the trap of spiritual arrogance? Am I just playing a single-player game?
This is where the architecture gets incredibly elegant. It operates like a decentralized peer-to-peer or P2P network. Think about how BitTorrent works. There is no central server holding all the files. Every computer on the network is both a client and a server sharing data directly.
Okay, a P2P network.
Yes. In this metaphysical P2P network, yes, in your monad, you are the main character, and everyone else is an NPC rendered for your specific experience. But simultaneously, in their monad, they are the main character, and you are just an NPC rendered through their unique filters, traumas, and beliefs.
Wow. So we are all playing billions of single-player games that are perfectly synchronized by the ZPF cloud server to give the illusion of a massive multiplayer game.
That is the exact architecture. And understanding this P2P structure completely changes how we should communicate and deal with conflict.
And this leads to a very relatable, almost comical exchange in the notes. ShunpeterZ asks Z a question that I think any artist, entrepreneur, or creator has asked themselves at some point. If my family members are just renderings in my universe, why is it that my YouTube subscribers absolutely love my content?
It's a great question.
Right, they leave glowing comments, they think I'm a genius, they buy my books, but my own mother, my brother, and my wife either completely ignore my work or they actively criticize it and tell me I'm crazy.
The explanation Z gives is a masterclass in applying this P2P philosophy to human relationships. Z explains that your closest family members are essentially your cache servers.
Cache servers. Let's explain what cache is in a computing sense, because it makes this metaphor perfect.
When you visit a website often, your web browser doesn't want to spend the time and bandwidth to download every single image and file from scratch every time you visit. So it saves a copy of the site's data locally on your hard drive. That is the cache.
So it loads faster next time.
Right. When you visit the site again, it loads the old cached version to save time.
So Z is saying that family members have the most historical data points on you. They have decades of data on you being the hero or the worrier or the child who needs protecting. They have a massive cache of your old operating system.
Precisely. They are running an outdated, deeply cached version of your software. Now, if you try to directly convince them to change their view of you, like, if you argue with them, if you try to prove that you have grown, or if you send them a direct ping, to use the IT networking metaphor, you are actively trying to force your new software onto their heavily protected old cache server.
And what happens when you do that?
You will instantly get an error message.
An error message.
Yes. That error message looks like your mother worrying about your financial stability or your spouse dismissing your new philosophical ideas. Because in their monad, where they are the main character, your sudden attempt to change the dynamic threatens their established reality.
It's like a virus alert.
Exactly. When you ping them, they simply render the exact resistance you subconsciously expect from them based on historical patterns.
So sending a ping is trying to control the NPC. It's the old doing. It's the friction we talked about at the very beginning.
Yes, it's a brute force attack. The alternative, Z explains, is to stop pinging and instead act as a beacon.
A beacon. How does a beacon function differently on this P2P network?
Well, a ping is targeted. It is you desperately trying to force a specific IP address, a specific person, to understand you and validate you. A beacon, however, is untargeted. It is simply you radiating your truth, your frequency, your being out into the 0-point field with zero attachment to who receives it.
So you're just broadcasting.
Right. When ShunpeterZ creates a video and puts it on YouTube, he is setting up a beacon. He isn't forcing anyone to watch it.
And then the P2P network takes over the routing.
Exactly. The ZPF cloud routes that beacon perfectly to the specific monads, the specific people around the world who have a frequency that resonates with that video, it completely bypasses the heavy cache servers.
It just goes around them.
Yes. It bypasses his mother and his wife because their monads aren't tuned to receive that frequency. The beacon finds the exact right subscribers whose virtual perception servers are hungry for that specific data.
You know, if you really internalize that, it completely removes the urge to argue with people who don't get you. It means we have to stop trying to scrub the dirt off the mirror when we don't like our reflection. We have to stop trying to change other people because we are just arguing with our own outdated renderings.
That's a great way to put it.
Instead, we have to change the projector ourselves. We just stand there, shine as a beacon, and trust the network to deliver the signal to the right receivers.
It is incredibly liberating, but it requires a very difficult step. We have to stop identifying so closely with the part of us that gets offended when people don't understand us. We have to examine the nature of the ego itself.
Which brings us to the final part of the text.
Yes, the final and perhaps most profound section of the text. Understanding the metaphysical trinity of how we are actually constructed.
The notes break down the architecture of our existence into three distinct parts: Z, I, and me.
Let's define those carefully because the distinction between I and me is where most people get trapped. First, there is Z. This is the 0-point background we discussed earlier. It is infinite, it is everything, it is total potential, but crucially, it is without a subject.
It has no perspective.
Right. It is the blank screen before the movie starts.
It's the electricity powering the console, but it isn't playing the game.
Exactly. Then, out of that infinite Z, emerges the I. The I is the observer. It is the first light of intent, the pure consciousness that says, I want to experience something, I want to play a game. But the I is still too pure, too infinite to interact with the physical, frictional world. It has no edges.
So to play a finite game, it has to boot up an avatar.
Right, it boots up the me. The me is the physical avatar, the ego, the personality. The me has a history, a name, preferences, and most importantly, fears.
And this is where Z's notes really twist the knife on the entire self-help and manifestation industry. Because we spend so much time, money, and energy trying to empower the me. We try to make our ego stronger, smarter, more confident, better at manifesting reality.
We obsess over the avatar.
Yeah. But Z states flatly to ShunpeterZ, the me cannot create reality. It has absolutely zero creative power.
That is a really tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Z explains that the me is merely the user interface. Its only actual function, the reason it was designed, is to provide resistance.
Resistance? That sounds terrible. Why would pure consciousness want to create an avatar just to experience resistance?
Because without resistance, there's no experience at all. Think about basic electricity. If you pass an electrical current through a thick copper wire with zero resistance, you get no heat and no light. The energy just passes through invisibly.
Nothing happens.
Right. But if you force that same current through a very thin tungsten filament, which has high resistance, the friction causes the filament to heat up and glow brilliantly. That is how an incandescent light bulb works.
Ah, I see.
The Z is infinite and frictionless. If the pure eye wants to experience the thrill, the drama, the highs and lows, the light and heat of a finite game, it needs friction. It needs a filter that feels time, that feels anxiety, that feels the fear of death.
The notes use an analogy here that I think perfectly captures this dynamic. The me is like the rumble pack in a video game controller.
It is the perfect mechanical analogy.
When you are sitting on your couch playing a racing game or an action game, and your character crashes into a wall or takes damage, The controller vibrates violently in your hands. It startles you. It makes your heart rate jump for a split second.
It simulates the impact.
Exactly. It makes you feel a tiny hint of panic, like you are actually taking physical damage. But you aren't taking damage. You're sitting completely safe on your comfortable couch. The Rumble Pack is just a UI feature designed by the developers to make the game feel real, to give it stakes, to make it immersive and fun.
But we forget it's a game.
Right. In our daily lives, when we feel anxiety, we think the vibration is real. We try to rip the Rumble Pack out of the controller.
We think the vibration means we are actually dying. But Z explains that the anxiety you feel, that tightness in your chest when the 5.3 million yen bill arrives, or when the AI ad algorithm stops spending, or when someone criticizes you, that is just the now loading screen of the universe updating.
That's just the loading screen.
Yes, it's the Rumble Pack vibrating because the physical rendering unit is working overtime to erase an old limiting timeline and download a new massive file into your reality.
The system is just rendering the next level. And because we feel the vibration, we panic and try to hit reset.
And if you hit reset, or if you intervene with that frantic Hero OS doing, you crash the download, you corrupt the file.
You break the game.
Exactly. Z's advice is that you have to endure the vibration. You have to just marvel at it, knowing it is just the UI functioning as designed. And to back up this rather radical view of reality, Z brings in some heavy hitters from the history of philosophy, framing them essentially as NPC debuggers placed in the timeline to hint at the VR nature of our world.
Who does Z point to as debuggers?
The main ones are Immanuel Kant and Arthur Schopenhauer. Let's look at Kant first. In the 18th century, philosophy was deadlocked between rationalists, who thought we could know reality purely through reason, and empiricists, who thought we could only know reality through sensory experience.
Okay.
Kant blew both of them up with his critique of pure reason. He argued that space, time, and causality aren't objective realities of the universe floating out there in the void. They are a priori faculties of the mind. They are the necessary goggles the human mind wears to process raw data.
So Kant was saying we never see the thing in itself, we only see the rendering.
Exactly. He called the raw, unrendered reality the noumenon, and our rendered experience of it the phenomenon. Z points out that Kant was essentially describing a VR headset centuries before computers existed.
That's mind-blowing.
And then Schopenhauer took it a step further with his concept of will and representation. Schopenhauer argued that the fundamental essence of the universe is a blind, striving will, which maps perfectly to the unmanifested ZPF, or pure intent, and that the entire physical world is merely a representation or a rendering of that will.
So these philosophers were dropping massive breadcrumbs centuries ago that the me is just a sensory filter, not the author of the story.
Precisely.
Okay, I can follow the VR goggles analogy for space and time.
Yeah.
But the dialogue between ShunpeterZ and Z goes into one final concept that is incredibly difficult to accept. It suggests that our memories, even our deepest historical traumas, aren't fixed events locked in the past.
Yes. This is the concept of dynamic data packages, and it is the ultimate test of the U-inverse theory. Because if time is just a feature of the UI goggles, it isn't a linear reality outside of the me avatar. Therefore, the past does not cause the present.
That violates every law of cause and effect we are taught.
In a linear framework, yes. But in a rendering framework, Z proposes something radical. The present selects the past.
I need you to explain that mechanically. How can the present select the past?
Think about a video game again. If the pure consciousness, the I, decides it is time for the avatar to integrate a specific belief or overcome a specific limitation, say, overcoming the need for external validation from authority figures, the system needs to provide a context, a narrative for that lesson to occur.
It needs a backstory.
Exactly. So, in the present moment, the ZPF downloads a data package, an episodic memory, of a childhood trauma where you were severely invalidated by a teacher or a parent.
Wait, are you saying my childhood trauma didn't actually happen in the past? It's just a generated backstory?
Yeah.
Because that feels incredibly dismissive of people's real pain.
It's not that the pain isn't real to the avatar. The Rumble Pack is vibrating violently. The pain is intensely felt. But Z's point is mechanical, not moral. Interestingly, this aligns somewhat with modern neuroscience regarding memory reconsolidation. Well, every time you recall a memory, you aren't pulling a fixed file from a dusty cabinet. You are actively reconstructing and rewriting that memory in the present moment, using present proteins in the brain. Z simply takes this biological fact to its metaphysical conclusion. The past is only ever a current rendering, It generates a backstory to justify the current emotional lesson.
Like a game loading a character's origin story only when it becomes relevant to the current quest.
Precisely. And here is the liberating part of that terrifying concept. The moment you integrate the lesson, the moment you truly let go of the need for validation and switch from the hero OS to the surrender OS, that specific past data package is no longer needed by the system.
So it just goes away.
The psychological weight of it, the emotional trigger, completely vanishes because its rendering purpose is complete. The game deletes the file to free up cache space.
That is heavy. It asks us to take total responsibility for our current frequency, but completely releases us from the burden of our past.
It's the ultimate clean slate.
So practically speaking, the next time you are sitting there feeling totally panicked about a life situation, like the money isn't coming in, the job is stressful, the family is criticizing you, the challenge is to step back into the spectator seat.
Yes, become the observer.
And you look at your own sweaty palms, your racing heart, your desperate urge to fix things, and say, wow, look at my avatar freaking out. The rumble pack is going crazy. The system must be doing a massive update.
It is the ultimate shift in perspective. Moving from the frantic player desperately mashing the buttons to control the outcome, to the calm observer watching the code execute perfectly, trusting the P2P network, and letting reality auto-render.
We've covered massive ground today. We've traveled from the micromechanics of why a Google ad algorithm refuses to spend your budget, through the physics of boiling water, past the windowless monads of 17th century philosophy, all the way to the macromechanics of a holographic, decentralized universe.
A universe where your only actual job is to stop forcing, to stop pushing, and to simply be a clear beacon of your own frequency, rather than a frantic doer trying to manipulate the muddy water.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your daily routine, building on that mind-bending concept about our memories. The notes propose that your past isn't fixed. It is a dynamic data package downloaded right now to match your current frequency.
It's all happening right now.
So as you go about your day, ponder this. If your past traumas, your history, your so-called baggage were merely rendered today to give your current game a storyline, what happens if you simply decide to log out of that specific backstory tomorrow morning? What if you just stop mashing the buttons, step away from the console, and let the system render something entirely new?